I never thought a single encounter could change the course of your life. But here's how it happened for me. I work at a small cafe downtown, nothing fancy, just enough to pay rent and keep the lights on. I've always been a realist, someone who keeps my head down and my heart guarded. Then one rainy Thursday, he walked in. He looked out of place, honestly. Expensive coat, polished shoes, that kind of aura that screams, I don't usually stand in line at a cafe. He ordered a ridiculously complicated coffee, paid with a credit card I could barely pronounce, and sat down at the corner table. I spilled some coffee on my apron just watching him struggle to unwrap a pastry. He laughed, genuinely, not the polite chuckle people usually give. That laugh was real. I found myself smiling back before I even realized it. Rough day? I asked, trying not to sound too forward. You could say that, he said, eyes crinkling, still smiling. But I think I'm about to have a better one. Little did I know, that small moment, me with my stained apron, him with his fancy coffee, was the start of something neither of us could have predicted. After that day, he started coming to the cafe almost every afternoon. I'll admit, at first, I was annoyed. He had this weird energy, like he belonged somewhere else entirely, and I was stuck serving lattes to survive. But there was something about him that was magnetic. He would sit there, sometimes reading, sometimes just staring out the window, and we'd talk. About everything and nothing. He asked me questions I'd never been asked before, things about my life, my dreams, my favorite books, stuff I didn't even share with my closest friends. Meanwhile, he never bragged about his life. But it leaked out. The way the barista at the other cafe across the street waved at him like he was royalty, the way people treated him with a mix of awe and fear, it was clear he was rich. Really rich. And I was, well, not. I had bills, debts, and a life that sometimes felt like it was just floating along without direction. And yet, sitting there, I felt like he saw me. Not my clothes, my apartment, or my paycheck, just me. It was strange, this invisible line that separated our worlds, and yet didn't matter at all when we talked. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. A few weeks passed, and our conversations got bolder. He started teasing me about my stubbornness, my obsession with detail, the way I took my life too seriously. I fired back with sarcastic comments, pretending to be annoyed, but secretly I loved it. One rainy evening, the cafe was empty except for us. He asked me why I didn't try to do something bigger with my life. I shrugged. I don't have the kind of luck you have. He laughed, that same laugh from the first day, the one that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. Luck? Maybe. But you've got grit. Something money can't buy. I wanted to argue, but I didn't. Because he was right. I had grit. And for the first time, I realized maybe he wasn't just someone to serve coffee to, maybe he was someone I could actually trust. And somewhere between jokes and rainy window confessions, I started noticing the little things. The way his eyes softened when he talked about his past, the way he noticed details I didn't even think anyone would see. He was rich, sure, but there was a loneliness there that mirrored my own in a weird, twisted way. By the end of that evening, I didn't just like him, I cared. And I didn't know if I was ready for that. Not everything was perfect, of course. Our world started to clash in ways neither of us expected. One evening, he invited me to his apartment. I walked in, shoes squeaking on the polished floors, walls lined with art I couldn't afford to frame in my dreams, and a view that made me dizzy. I felt small. Out of place. "You okay?" he asked, noticing my stiff posture. "Yeah, it's just, a lot," I muttered, embarrassed by my own awe. He laughed softly, a little sadly. "I forget sometimes, not everyone lives in a golden bubble." It stung, not just because he was rich, but because I realized there was a world I couldn't touch, no matter how close we were. I didn't want pity, and I didn't want charity. I wanted to be seen as equal. But as awkward as I felt, he didn't judge me. He didn't try to impress me or change me. He just made space for me to exist in his world without stepping on my own. That night, we didn't talk about money or difference. We just laughed, told stories, and shared quiet silences that somehow felt intimate. For the first time, I understood that friendship, and maybe something deeper, wasn't about what you had. It was about what you gave. Part 5 will be where their friendship starts to deepen into something undeniable, and the first hints of love. After that night, things changed, but quietly. We started meeting outside the cafe, going for walks in the park, talking about books, music, dreams. No fancy dinners, no pretense, just us. One afternoon, he brought me a small, tattered notebook. "Thought you might like this," he said. I looked at it. It wasn't expensive, just worn edges and blank pages. "Thanks, but why?" "Because I want you to write your story," he said, looking at me like he meant it. "Not someone else's version. Yours." Something shifted then. It wasn't romance, not yet, but it was something fragile and glowing. I realized I wanted him to see me, really see me, and I wanted to see him too, beyond the money, beyond the loneliness. We laughed more that day than we had in weeks. And in one quiet moment, when our hands brushed as we reached for the notebook at the same time, I felt that spark, the one that tells you life is about to change. We didn't speak of it. We didn't need to. Something had started between us, something that felt bigger than friendship, but safe enough to nurture without fear. Not everything could stay easy, of course. Life, as it tends to do, started pressing on us from different directions. He got caught up in work, big deals, high society events, the kind of stuff that made my head spin. I tried to understand, I really did, but some nights he'd cancel plans, distracted, exhausted. And I couldn't hide the resentment that bubbled inside me. Why did his world always demand him while mine barely let me breathe? Then came the gossip. People at the cafe, mutual friends, even strangers started making comments. "Are you dating him?" they'd whisper. "Doesn't he have a real life?" I hated it. Not because I doubted him, but because it made me question myself. I wasn't rich, I wasn't glamorous, I wasn't supposed to belong in his world. I wanted to shout, "I'm enough." One night, after a particularly long week, we met in the park. The silence between us felt heavy, full of unspoken worries. "I don't want to lose this," he finally said. "Us. Whatever this is." I nodded, because I felt the same, but I also realized that caring wasn't always enough. Friendship, and maybe love, meant navigating these cracks without falling into them. After that night in the park, things changed. Not magically, life was still messy, but we started leaning on each other differently. I went to his apartment one evening, not as a guest, but as someone who belonged. We cooked dinner together, awkward, chaotic, laughing at burnt onions and spilled pasta. For a few hours, there was no difference between rich and poor. Just two people sharing a life in that tiny, ordinary way. He shared stories I'd never heard before, childhood memories, fears he kept hidden behind smiles and suits. I told him things I'd never admitted out loud, about my family, my dreams, my failures. And he didn't judge. He just listened, and that listening felt like love. For the first time, I realized, maybe love isn't fireworks or grand gestures. Maybe it's this, someone seeing you at your worst, you're awkward, you're messy, and deciding that's enough. That night, as we sat on the couch, side by side, our hands brushed again. And this time, we didn't pull away. Life, of course, wasn't done testing us. One morning, he got a job offer that would take him across the country, months away, big promotion, the kind of opportunity only someone with his wealth could dream of. Exciting, yes, but terrifying for us. We sat in the cafe, the same one where we met, drinking coffee in silence. I could feel the tension pressing down like a storm cloud. You have to go, I said finally, forcing a smile. You've worked for this. You can't let me hold you back. I know, he said quietly, staring at his cup. But leaving, it feels wrong. Leaving us. We didn't speak for a while. Neither of us wanted to break the fragile bubble we'd built, but the reality of our worlds, his fast-moving, mine slower and steadier, was threatening to pull us apart. In that moment, I realized that love and friendship weren't about avoiding pain. They were about choosing each other, even when the world made it hard. The night before he was supposed to leave, we met at the park again, the same place where we had first admitted, silently, that we cared. I don't want this to be goodbye, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Then it won't be, I replied, surprising even myself. We'll figure it out. Somehow. Together. We sat there for hours, talking about the future, our fears, our hopes, the ridiculous challenges of our worlds colliding. He held my hand, and I held his, and for the first time, it felt like nothing else mattered. Not money. Not distance. Not the judgments of other people. We weren't perfect. We didn't have a magic solution. But we had each other. And that was enough. When he left the next morning, it wasn't a goodbye. It was a promise to stay in each other's lives, to nurture the friendship, to let love grow in its own time. Years passed. Life moved in its unpredictable, messy way. He traveled for work, I worked my own way up, and we both had relationships, successes, failures, and yet, somehow, we always came back to each other. We celebrated birthdays, victories, heartbreaks, and quiet nights just talking about nothing. We argued sometimes, laughed until our stomachs hurt, supported each other when the world got heavy. Money, distance, differences, they never disappeared, but they stopped mattering. One evening, sitting on his balcony overlooking the city lights, he turned to me and smiled. You know, I think this, us, was never about love in the cliché way. It's everything else. Friendship, trust, knowing someone's heart. That's enough. I smiled back, squeezing his hand. It is. It really is. And in that moment, I understood. Love doesn't always come with fireworks or grand gestures. Sometimes, it's quiet. Steady. Enduring. It's showing up for someone over and over again. Two people from different worlds, who met by chance, found something priceless. Something that neither money nor fate could ever take away. We were richer than either of us had ever been, just by having each other.